Utility scripts, are they just a lifesaver or an unnecessary shortcut? On one hand, they make our lives easier by centralizing commonly used functions, and on the other, they can create hidden dependencies and discourage better coding practices. So, should you use one? Let's break it down. Welcome to 100 Tips in Unity. This is episode 6. So, what exactly are utility scripts? A utility script is essentially a collection of reusable static functions, and they help with executing common tasks in our project. If you look at static functions like these, they are not dependent on other game objects or components for the most bit. They're more like general purpose solutions. Okay. In this example, I have a static class called utils, which contains 9 static functions, which can be used in other scripts globally. Okay. As long as they use the utilities namespace. Before I continue, I want to give a quick shout out to Volt. I've learned some of these functions and syntaxing from Volt. He shared this code and I edited it to my convenience. So I'll have 2 links in the description, one to the code that he has shared and another one which is my version of doing things. Essentially functions like these. For example, here we have random range no dupe. This generates a random number that's always different from the last chosen number. This is useful, especially if you have things like abilities where you want to have a new random ability but you don't want it to be the previous one. This is really useful. If you were to write this code manually, then you'd have to do this for every dependency. So one simple solution would be to create a public static utils class. I know this might sound complicated, but it's essentially creating public static functions inside a public static class. And we're just giving it the name utilities. Plus, we are also adding the entire class to the namespace utilities. We'll take a look at the syntaxing in just a little bit. It's not relevant, but it's really great. So, what exactly is the tip in this video? I know this might be a little bit more advanced, but even if you don't understand, please listen this through. Public static functions are generally not the best way to go about things. A couple of reasons is because it has global access. Now that might sound great because you have global access, right? The downside of that is it creates hidden dependencies. Another reason why static functions are bad is because of how it handles multi-threading. If you don't know what multi-threading is, it's just different cores in your CPU doing different works. It's how C# jobs system works. And you don't want static functions to work on variables that are shared between multiple threads. It's a complicated thing, but it's generally considered not great for coding ethics. But it's not all that bad. If you look at some of these code, for example, a toggle object, even though this is just a 3 lines of code, this might be something that you may want in a lot of scripts. And it could be UI, it could be input in some cases. And you would want a common shared library for all of this same logic. And in those cases, utility scripts or static functions are great. And they also help with execution. You don't have long lines of code. Okay, you could download this script and the script that Volt has given from the link in the description. Shout out to Volt once again for giving me another video idea that I could do in just a few hours. But you would want functions inside your script that are generally commonly utilized. For example, we have this function public static which returns a vector 3. It is random navmesh point. But inside this, we are using navmesh.samplePosition, which is from unityengine.ai. This is a bad example, in my opinion, for a public static function because it uses something else, which is not really a good idea. But I really find this extremely useful because in every 3D game or something like that, you would typically want a random navmesh point. But this is not something that you typically want in a general script. But I'm just keeping it in because I've had really important use cases for this function. Another bad example of a public static function would be shuffle list. And this just randomly shuffles the elements of a list. This could be really useful, but you don't always need to use this function, right? You don't always have to shuffle everything in your game. So this is not something that you would use in every single game. Typically, you just want simple mathematical or data manipulation kind of functions. For example, clamp angle, it's a solid one in my opinion. It just does the job. Of course, it does use the math library, but it is use specific. It's universally useful because it's mathematics. Another great example could be random vector, which only contains a single line of code, but the logic is strong enough that it returns a random vector with the ability to exclude randomization along different axes, which is useful. In case you're not using any one of these functions, you can simply hit backspace, assuming you already have a backup which contains these functions. So it is really, really good. So what is the point that I'm trying to make? The point that I'm trying to make, or the tip of this video, is to actually practice or create your own custom utility script. It doesn't sound like an actual tip, but you will learn a bunch of different things. It is important to understand that these things exist, and there will be times in your game development journey where you will have to prioritize convenience, because we are all mortal beings. We don't have all the time in this world. We will all die one day. And sometimes it's important to do things the wrong way just so that we get it done. So the whole tip is technically a homework for you guys. Just open Unity and create a utility script all on your own if possible. I'm not telling you to use utility scripts. I'm telling you to try to make one so that you understand the consequences of public static functions. You will understand how problematic this could get for a bigger project, but you should try it at least once so that you get the idea that these things exist, how singletons work, how dependencies are a pain. You learn a lot. Okay, let's also take a look at the syntaxing of functions. Let me actually look it up what exactly it's called. Okay, I believe these are called XML documentation comments in C#. So the way you do this is by writing a function and you use the /, I believe, 3 times, and it automatically adds a summary. Okay, and you can give a summary for this function. Now, whenever I hover over this function, Visual Studio actually shows me the summary. If I have string custom message or something like this, but if I // here, it automatically adds a param node here. Now, if you hover over print hi, it says the summary, and if you hover over custom message, it gives you a custom, I don't know what you call it, but you can see that we have added proper documentation comments. So I hope this video was useful. Like, it's not a usual tip, but I hope you understood how things work. I've been extremely busy, so I couldn't come up with proper examples, nor I could find the time to actually script this video. So I hope this video gave you some insight on how static functions work. It's generally bad, but if you want convenience, if you want consistency, if you're working in a team and you just want to just get things done, no one's going to know that you have used public static functions when they're playing your game. If it saves you time and energy and effort, I recommend you do it anyways. Even if you don't want to use it, write one. You will learn the little intricacies, and that's the whole tip. Worst comes to worst, you will have a reusable script that you could use or you could share. Just give it a go. That is the entire tip. I hope this one was useful, and I will see you in the next one. I'm very tired, which is why this video will not be heavily edited.